911. What's your emergency? The man's voice on the other end is shaky, breathless, almost rehearsed, yet unmistakably disturbed. I need to report a break-in and a murder. My wife. She's on the floor. Bloody. Stiff. She's not moving. That call came in at 9:07 a.m. on a quiet Saturday morning. The voice belonged to Marcus Monroe, a respected Las Vegas firefighter. And the woman? The one lying lifeless on the floor of her living room, soaked in her own blood, her body broken, was his estranged wife, Lila Monroe, a cocktail waitress, a mother, a woman who had worked through every kind of pain, except this. Marcus had arrived at her home that morning with their 8-year-old daughter, Ava. They were supposed to pick up a forgotten item, a school folder or a stuffed animal, nothing that should have led to death. But when they pulled into the driveway, the garage door was wide open. Strange. Lila was cautious. Always had been. Marcus claimed that was the first sign something was wrong. So he walked in, step by step, through the garage, past the kitchen, into the living room. And then he saw her. Lila was sprawled out near the stairs, her arms twisted unnaturally, her face beaten beyond recognition. There was blood, too much blood, and there was no doubt. She was already gone. Police arrived quickly. The scene was brutal, but strangely, it wasn't chaotic. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken windows, no overturned furniture. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. They'd come in, struck fast, struck hard, and vanished. Marcus, standing outside the house holding his daughter close, seemed shell-shocked. He repeated the same story. I was at the firehouse all night, on call, a full 24-hour shift. I hadn't seen her in 36 hours, and it seemed believable. After all, he was a first responder, a man sworn to protect and serve. He wept. He trembled. He even told the paramedics, "I just want to die." For a moment, the police believed him. But beneath the surface, something didn't sit right. Lila Monroe's body told a story Marcus's words didn't. Her fingers had been broken, snapped clean through as she tried to shield her face. Her skull had been crushed by repeated blows. This wasn't just a killing. This was a deliberate, calculated, rage-fueled execution. And worse yet, the weapon was nowhere to be found. No knife, no gun, no bat. But the bruising, the bone fractures all pointed to one thing. A hammer. Back at the station, detectives reviewed Marcus's alibi. He really had been on shift all night. There was a record. Witnesses, duty logs. He couldn't have killed her, could he? And yet, as one investigator would later say, alibis don't always mean innocence. Sometimes they're just part of the plan. At first, suspicion wandered. Had Lila been targeted? A robbery gone wrong? Her house had been broken into just weeks earlier. Her wedding ring and swimsuit bottoms were stolen. A pair of men's boxer shorts were left behind. Creepy? Yes. Coincidental? Maybe. But fatal? Not yet. Nobody realized it then. But the break-in wasn't random. It was the first step in a much darker blueprint. Back outside Lila's home, the cameras rolled. Neighbors watched from behind fences. And Ava, the child now caught in a nightmare too cruel to imagine, held her father's hand. She didn't know it yet, but the man who stood beside her, her protector, her daddy, would soon be accused of orchestrating her mother's murder. Not with his own hands, but with someone else's. And the only reason anyone ever discovered the truth was because of one single, stupid mistake. Before she became the center of a brutal murder case, before the media painted her as a tragic victim, Lila Monroe was a woman with dreams, bright ones. She was born in March 1966 in the quiet Mormon heartland of Provo, Utah. One of 7 children, Lila grew up in a modest household filled with structure, tradition, and Sunday service. She was raised to be polite, gracious, a good daughter. But even as a child, Lila carried something within her, a spark that longed for more. At 12, her family relocated to the East Coast, first to Pennsylvania, then Virginia, where she enrolled at South Ridge High School. And it was there that Lila began to come into her own. She joined the cheerleading squad, laughed loud, wore bright colors. Friends described her as bubbly, affectionate, and infectiously optimistic. She wasn't rebellious, not yet, but she wasn't afraid to stand out either. She graduated in 1984 with that same spark still burning. The world was hers for the taking if she could just figure out where she belonged. That answer didn't come right away. She bounced between retail jobs in upscale boutiques, Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, serving high-end clientele and soaking in the glamour. But the East Coast never truly fit. It felt too buttoned up, too cold. And so, at 28, Lila packed up everything and did something bold. She moved back west to Las Vegas, Nevada. It was a risk, but for Lila, it was a chance at reinvention. Sin City was the complete opposite of her conservative upbringing. Flashing lights, loud music, unpredictable nights. But strangely, it felt like home. She moved there to be near her sister Clara, but quickly found her own rhythm. She snagged a job as a cocktail waitress at the Fiesta Casino. And later, when the brand-new Palms Resort opened its doors in 2001, Lila was among the first to be hired. That's when things really changed. At the Palms, Lila found more than just a job. She found her calling. The tips were fantastic. The crowd was electric, and the camaraderie between staff felt like a second family. She could pull in $100,000 a year in wages and tips, most of it in casino chips. On a good night, she could make over $800 just by keeping a smile on her face and a tray in her hands. One coworker would later say, "I never saw Lila with a frown. She lit up every room, always laughing, always moving. She worked hard, yes, but she lived even harder. She shopped freely, dined out often, took vacations on a whim. Why not? She earned it. She was single, independent, and free. And she had no idea her greatest joy was just around the corner." In 2002, during a late-night shift at the Palms, Lila met a man. His name was Marcus Monroe. He was tall, charming, and clean-cut. A firefighter with a tragic backstory and movie star looks. He'd grown up on a chicken farm in rural Nevada, lost his father young, raised by a single mom. He'd been valedictorian, a West Point graduate, a military man turned EMT, and now he served the city as a Las Vegas firefighter. A real-life hero. To many, Marcus was the epitome of the American dream. To Lila, he was magnetic. The attraction was immediate. They talked, laughed, danced. 1 year later, their daughter Ava was born. 3 years after that, they were married on a sun-soaked beach in Hawaii. March 16, 2006. Lila had just turned 40. The wedding photos were picture-perfect. Lila in a flowing dress, barefoot in the sand. Marcus in linen slacks, holding their giggling daughter between them. It looked like the beginning of something beautiful. And for a time, it was. They bought a house together in a quiet Las Vegas suburb. A modest place, but enough to feel like a kingdom. Lila kept working at the Palms. Marcus moved up the ranks in the fire department. They raised Ava with care and discipline. Half the values of Lila's Mormon upbringing, half the free-spirited warmth of Vegas life. From the outside looking in, they were the couple everyone envied. A happy family, a strong marriage, financially stable, emotionally grounded. But behind closed doors, things were already beginning to unravel. Lila didn't see it right away, but like a slow leak beneath a polished floorboard, the cracks were forming, little by little. And by the time she realized just how deep those cracks ran, it was already too late. If you asked anyone who knew Marcus Monroe, they'd say the same thing. He was a good man, a family man. He was the guy who brought donuts to the firehouse, the one who helped elderly neighbors shovel snow, the one who sent money back home to support his disabled sister. Even posed for a firefighter charity calendar once, shirtless, smiling, a hometown hero. To the world, Marcus Monroe was solid, dependable, charismatic, the kind of man people trusted without question. But the truth, as we'd come to learn, was far more complicated. Marcus was born in September 1972, 6 years younger than Lila. He grew up on a small ranch outside Reno, Nevada, where life was tough and expectations were higher than the roof of the barn. When his father died unexpectedly, Marcus stepped up, became the man of the house before he was even a teenager. He learned discipline, sacrifice, the art of holding it all in. and that discipline carried him far. He graduated valedictorian of his high school class, earned a place at West Point, one of the most elite military academies in the country. He joined the Army Corps of Engineers, building schools and water systems in developing nations. He was praised for his leadership, his loyalty, his grit. But when he came back stateside, something fell off. The civilian life felt small, gray, trapped behind a desk and a name badge. So Marcus pivoted again. He left engineering, trained as an EMT, and eventually joined the Las Vegas Fire Department. It was there that his identity crystallized. The uniform, the structure, the praise. It filled something in him, something fragile. He was no longer the forgotten boy from the ranch. He was Marcus Monroe, hero firefighter. But with that identity came expectation, pressure, performance, control. When he met Lila, he was smitten. She was everything he wasn't, spontaneous, warm, and wide open. She made him laugh, made him feel human. And when she got pregnant, he didn't flinch. He leaned in, bought a house, proposed, did all the right things. From the outside, their life looked beautiful. But inside their home, another battle was brewing. Marcus believed in order, in duty, in routine. He expected dinner on the table, bills paid on time, clothes folded just right. Lila was different. She worked long nights, came home exhausted, slept through the morning sun. She liked to spend what she earned. She dressed up for work, wore heels, lipstick, perfume. To Marcus, that didn't feel like a marriage. It felt like a threat. The Great Recession hit in 2008, and everything shifted. Marcus lost money in a housing investment. Lila's casino tips started to shrink. Tourists weren't coming. The lights of Vegas were dimming. And with that financial stress came something darker, resentment. Marcus grew suspicious of Lila's late hours. He accused her of dressing like a hooker in front of their daughter, Ava. He criticized her spending habits, her friends, her independence. He began controlling what she wore, when she left, even who she talked to. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, methodical, like smoke before a fire. But Lila didn't scream. She didn't fight back. She tried to fix it. She suggested counseling, held on to hope, told herself Marcus was just stressed. Maybe she believed that marriage meant compromise, even when it hurt. Or maybe she just didn't want Ava to grow up in a broken home. Whatever the reason, she stayed. Until she couldn't anymore. In April 2012, after a particularly bad argument, Lila packed her things and moved into a small townhouse nearby. She was done trying to force happiness from a man who no longer made her feel safe. They began splitting custody of Ava, an 8-year-old girl stuck between two worlds. Lila worked nights. Marcus worked long shifts, too. So Ava spent more and more time with Marcus's mother, who lived just 10 minutes away. It wasn't ideal, but it was stable, at least for a while. To outsiders, Marcus seemed like he was taking the separation in stride. He was still showing up to work, still making jokes at the firehouse, still playing the role of the loving father. But inside, something had twisted. He was losing control over his marriage, over his finances, over his image. And control was everything to Marcus Monroe. So when that fragile illusion began to crack, he made a decision, a quiet, horrifying, irreversible decision. He would find a way to fix it, not through love, not through therapy, not even through divorce. No, he would erase Lila from the picture altogether. By the summer of 2012, the Monroes were no longer the dream couple they once seemed to be. The beach wedding photos were fading in their frames. The smiles had long vanished. And behind closed doors, what was left wasn't love, it was tension. Sharp, constant, unforgiving. Lila had moved into her own place. A 2-bedroom townhouse just outside the city center. Modest, safe, hers. She was trying to rebuild, trying to move forward with dignity and peace for her, for Ava. But peace, as it turned out, was never something Marcus Monroe could stand to lose. Friends of Lila would later recall how she tried to stay upbeat, how she decorated the new place with bright pillows and scented candles, how she still wore her smile, even after double shifts at the casino. But there were signs, subtle ones. She stopped talking about Marcus in front of Ava. She stopped answering his calls right away. She started locking her doors, double-checking her windows. Something in her had shifted. She was trying not to show it, but she was afraid. What Lila didn't know, or maybe didn't want to believe, was that Marcus had already started laying the groundwork for something far more sinister. He didn't scream. He didn't break down. He simply made a call to a man named Reese Granger. Reese wasn't a friend in the traditional sense. He wasn't family. He wasn't even employed. Reese was a homeless ex-con, living in a tent out in the Nevada foothills. He was unpredictable, desperate, quiet. But to Marcus, he had one very specific quality. He was expendable. And more importantly, he was loyal. They'd met years earlier when Reese was briefly staying with his sister on the same street as the Monroes. Marcus had hired him once or twice to do odd jobs. Paint the fence, mow the lawn, patch the roof. He paid in cash. No questions asked. And to Reese, Marcus wasn't just an employer. He was a savior. So when Marcus called him up that summer, Reese answered. At first, it was subtle. Marcus offered him money for little tasks. Come check out the siding. Help move some boxes. But those requests turned darker, more pointed. They met at a Lowe's hardware store. Security footage would later capture them on camera, side by side, buying a hammer, a knife, and a pair of gloves. Chilling in hindsight, unremarkable at the time. At some point, and only Marcus knows when, the conversation shifted from errands to murder. He wanted Lila gone, and he wanted Reese to do it for him. $600 up front. Thousands more to follow. Reese didn't say no. In early September, just weeks before the murder, Lila's townhouse was broken into. The scene was bizarre. Nothing valuable was taken. No cash, no electronics. Instead, the intruder had stolen her wedding ring and a pair of her bathing suit bottoms. Even more disturbing, the burglar used her shower and left behind a pair of small boxer shorts. Lila was shaken, terrified even, but in true Lila fashion, she tried to brush it off. She called it a one-time thing, said lightning wouldn't strike twice. She didn't change the locks, didn't install cameras, didn't want to live in fear. She just wanted her life back. But lightning would strike again, and this time, it would kill her. Marcus, of course, played the concerned co-parent. He checked in. He acted sympathetic. He even agreed to go to marriage counseling with her, something Lila had been asking for months. Maybe he gave her just enough hope to keep her off guard. Or maybe he wanted to appear innocent long before he got blood on his hands. By late September, the plan was nearly in place. Marcus had coached Reese. He'd shown him maps of the Palms casino where Lila worked. They discussed everything from car accidents to suffocation. But when Reese tried to approach the casino's garage, he panicked. Too many cameras. Too much security. So they settled on the one place Marcus knew she'd feel safe, her home. He even gave Reese a key, the same key Lila had used to walk through that front door every night. Reese began surveilling the property. He broke in, not once, but multiple times, to scout the layout, to make sure nothing would go wrong when the time came. That earlier break-in? That was no random crime. It was a dry run. And through all this, Marcus kept up the mask. The loving dad, the grieving ex, the community hero. Even Lila's sister, Clara, said she didn't suspect a thing. I think he wants to fix things, Lila told her once. He's been better lately. But Clara wasn't convinced. Something about him always felt too rehearsed. Still, Lila had hope. And hope, as we'd come to see, would cost her everything. The signs were there. And Lila Monroe, deep down, felt them. The strange noises at night. The lights flickering when she was alone. The hairline cracks in her sense of safety. But the real wake-up call came with that first break-in. A violation so intimate, it barely felt like theft. Her wedding ring was gone. So were few personal items. Oddest of all, the intruder had left behind something. Boxer shorts, size small, folded on the floor near the bathroom. That wasn't burglary. That was a message. Lila had told her sister Clara that she felt like someone had been watching her. That she'd come home from work some nights, and the air in the room felt wrong. Like someone had been there just moments before. Or worse, was still there, hiding, holding their breath. But Lila didn't tell the police. She didn't want to seem paranoid. She didn't want to cause trouble. She just wanted to keep her life on track. And in her heart, she was still trying to believe the best in people. even Marcus. Meanwhile, Marcus Monroe was playing the part perfectly. He dropped Ava off for school. He helped his neighbors with their lawn. He smiled, waved, laughed with co-workers at the firehouse. But beneath that polished mask, the plan was already alive. And Reese Granger, the man Marcus had chosen to carry it out, was preparing. Reese wasn't a criminal mastermind. He wasn't calculated. He wasn't careful. But he was desperate. He lived out of a tent in the Nevada foothills, scavenged food from dumpsters, sold scraps and small-time drugs just to get by. Marcus knew all of this. That's what made Reese perfect. He was a ghost, a man nobody would miss, a man the police would look at and instantly assume, yes, he did this. And Reese just wanted to please. When Marcus offered $600 up front and a few thousand after the job, he agreed. No questions asked. But even for Reese, the idea of murdering a woman wasn't something he could just step into. He had to ease into it, get familiar, make the space feel less foreign. So he used the key Marcus had given him, Lila's house key, to enter multiple times in the weeks leading up to the attack. He scoped out her hallway, learned her patterns, tested how long it took the neighborhood dogs to bark. And that first break-in, the one that terrified Lila, it was his rehearsal. It was also his mistake. The boxer shorts he left behind weren't just weird. They were DNA evidence. He'd gotten careless. And later, when the real murder occurred, that tiny slip-up, one forgotten detail, would become the first thread that unraveled Marcus's perfect plan. But in late September, the stage was fully set. Marcus had coached Reese on what to do. He'd suggested several ways to stage the murder: a home invasion, a robbery, even an accidental fall. He even drew a map of the Palms casino garage, just in case Reese wanted to surprise her after work. But Reese was spooked by the cameras and security. So the final decision was made. They'd kill Lila at her home. When? The early morning of September 29th. She'd be coming off a late-night shift. She'd be tired. She'd be alone. Perfect. That night, Lila clocked out of her shift at the Palms at exactly 3:01 a.m. Security cameras caught her smiling briefly at a coworker, yawning, stretching her back, saying goodnight. No idea it would be the last time anyone ever saw her alive. She drove the 30-minute route home, past the neon glow, down the quiet streets, into her peaceful little neighborhood. She pulled into the garage, turned off the engine, entered her house through the kitchen door. She didn't turn on the lights. She was exhausted. She just wanted bed. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Reese Granger was already inside, waiting, breathing slowly, gripping a hammer. She walked down the hallway toward the stairs. Her shoes clacked softly on the floor. And then, he struck. She barely had time to raise her hands. He broke her fingers first, then crushed her skull. 1, 2, 3. Too many times to count. By the time he stopped swinging, the hammer handle had snapped in half. That's how violently he struck her. She died alone, on the floor of her own home. The mother of an 8-year-old girl. A woman who smiled through the darkest days and tried to keep believing in good. Gone. Reese didn't take anything. He didn't even run. He left the garage door open, just like Marcus had instructed. That was the signal, so that when Marcus arrived later with Ava, he'd know. It's done, and he could play his next role, the grieving husband. It was just after 3 a.m. on September 29th, 2012, when Lila Monroe left work for the last time. The security camera outside the Palms Casino showed her pushing open the employee exit door, keys in hand, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, bone-tired, after hours of serving drinks, laughing with high rollers, and walking miles in heels. But there was peace in her expression. It had been a long shift, but she was going home. To her warm bed, to silence, to her daughter's favorite blanket, still on the couch. She had no idea that someone was already waiting for her in the shadows of her hallway. She parked her car in the garage, stepped inside, didn't turn on the lights. She never did after late shifts. Why bother? She knew her house, every corner, every creak. But this night wasn't like the others. As she crossed the kitchen, something shifted in the air. A tension, like she wasn't alone. And she wasn't. Reese Granger had slipped in hours earlier, using the key Marcus had given him. He waited in the dark, quiet, barely breathing. the hammer clutched in his hand like a promise. When Lila stepped into the hallway, she didn't scream. There wasn't time. She raised her hands instinctively. The same hands that once braided Ava's hair, that once held Marcus's face on their wedding day. He smashed them first. Her fingers shattered. She stumbled. She tried to speak. Maybe she even whispered why. But he didn't stop. The hammer came down again, and again, until her skull caved in, until the handle snapped from the force, until her body stopped moving. She was dead before she hit the floor. Crimson pooled beneath her like spilled paint. Her mouth slightly open. One shoe off, and then Reese left. Just like that. No panique. No ruse. Just silence. He walked out the same way he came in, leaving the garage door wide open. The signal. At 9:07 a.m., Marcus Monroe arrived at the house with his daughter, Ava. She wanted to pick up her favorite toy before going to Grandma's. A simple, innocent detour. Marcus noticed the garage door first. Strange, he said aloud. Suspicious. He told police it made him uneasy. He walked in ahead of Ava. Moments later, his voice trembled through the line to 911. My wife she's on the floor. Bloody. Stiff. Not moving. Paramedics arrived within minutes. But there was nothing to be done. The wound to Lila's head was so severe, they first thought she'd been shot. The floor was slick with blood. Her face was unrecognizable. Whoever had done this had meant to kill. There was no hesitation. No remorse. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a job. Marcus was questioned at the scene. He sobbed, told the officers he was a firefighter, said he hadn't seen Lila in almost 2 days. He'd been on a 24-hour shift. Said he just came to get something for Ava. Everything about his story was clean, practiced, and on paper, it checked out. Duty logs confirmed his shift. His mother confirmed Ava had stayed with her the night before. The neighbors had nothing to say. No one suspected a thing. At first. But then, the silence started to echo. Police combed the house. Nothing was stolen. No sign of forced entry. No prints. No weapon. Only that open garage door. And a body broken in ways too violent to be random. Who could have done this? A stalker? A predator? Someone from Lila's work? Detectives started looking through her past. And then, one detail surfaced, almost forgotten. The break-in. 3 weeks earlier, Lila's house had been broken into. The ring. The boxers. The creepy vibe. No suspects. Until now. 2 days after the murder, an unexpected figure walked into the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. His name was Darnell Harris, but everyone called him Big Will. He wasn't a cop, not a family member, just a maintenance worker at an apartment complex. He had a story. A friend of his, a man known only as Greyhound, had confessed to him. Not hinted, not implied. Confessed. I just murdered a woman, Greyhound had said. She came home. I hit her with a hammer. Until it broke. Will was stunned. Greyhound hadn't even seemed remorseful. He acted like he'd done something noble, something he'd been paid to do. Police were skeptical at first, but they followed Will's lead anyway. They tracked down Greyhound, whose real name was Reese Granger. He was found near a gas station, carrying drugs. They arrested him, brought him in, and the investigation shifted. Fast. Reese denied everything at first. Said Will was lying. Said he'd never even heard of Lila Monroe. But police weren't done. They searched Reese's desert campsite, deep in the Nevada foothills. That's where they found them. A blood-soaked pair of jeans, buried under a bush. They tested them on the spot. The results? Lila's DNA. That was the break. That was the moment the case cracked wide open. Reese didn't just stumble into Lila's home. He knew her. He'd been inside before. And in his phone, one name kept appearing. Marcus Monroe. Every homicide detective will tell you. There's no such thing as a perfect murder. But this one came disturbingly close. If it weren't for Darnell Big Will Harris, a maintenance man with a moral compass, the death of Lila Monroe might have gone unsolved. Reese Granger, the man who bludgeoned her to death, might have disappeared back into the desert. His bloody jeans buried beneath sagebrush. His name forgotten by Monday. But Will spoke up, and when detectives finally got Reese in custody, that's when everything began to unravel. At first, Reese denied it all. I didn't kill anybody, he told investigators. He was twitchy, jittery, defensive. He didn't trust the police, and the police didn't trust him. But they didn't need his trust. They had his genes, and the blood on them matched Lila Monroe's DNA. They also had Will, who told them exactly what Reese had said, that he'd hit Lila so many times with a hammer, the handle broke. So detectives tried a different tactic. They didn't accuse Reese. They didn't push. They simply asked, "Who gave you the job?" At first, Reese said nothing. He bit his tongue, looked at the floor, sweated through his shirt. But then a name slipped out. "Marcus," he mumbled. "My friend. Marcus, the firefighter." That was the moment detectives went still. Marcus Monroe, the grieving husband, the man who called 911 with tears in his voice, the firefighter who'd handed his daughter a juice box as paramedics wheeled out her mother's body? That Marcus? Reese nodded. That's him. He told police that Marcus had paid him $600 up front, with a promise of $3,000 more. In exchange, kill Lila. At first, Reese claimed the plan was to make it look like an accident. He'd hit her over the head, then stage a car crash, or smother her with a bag. They even talked about doing it in the Palms Casino garage, where Reese could sneak in and wait. But security was too tight. Too many cameras. Too many people. Eventually, they settled on her home. Familiar. Isolated. And most importantly, Marcus had a key. He handed it over like it meant nothing. "Just use this to go in. I'll know you did it if the garage doors open when I come by," Marcus had said. Cold. Calculated. Cruel. Reese also revealed that he didn't choose Lila. He didn't know her. Had never spoken to her. He was just a tool. A hammer, wielded by someone else's hand. The real force behind the murder wasn't the man who swung the weapon. It was the man who told him when, where, and why. But Reese wasn't just talking. He had proof. Detectives checked his phone. In the month leading up to the murder, he and Marcus had exchanged 87 calls. 87. Not 3. Not 5. 87. That's not handyman work. That's not help me patch the roof. That's a plot. A conspiracy. A murder contract unfolding in real time. Even more damning, detectives found security footage from Lowe's. There, in grainy black and white, were Marcus and Reese. Buying gloves. A hammer. A knife. A shopping list for death. Police also tracked down the murder weapon. Reese led them to a shallow grave just outside the city limits. There, buried in the dirt, was the broken hammer. Splintered handle. Dried blood. The barcode traced back to the very Lowe's they'd shopped at together. There was no denying it now. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a rage killing. This was a blueprint, carefully drafted by a man the city trusted. Detectives returned to Marcus's family with the evidence. They were stunned, horrified. His sister wept, then called Marcus from her car. He didn't say much. He just got in his pickup truck, dropped Ava off at his mother's house, and vanished. By the time police issued a bolo, Marcus was already flying down the Summerlin Parkway at 90 miles per hour. He didn't slow down, didn't hit the brakes. He plowed straight into a concrete divider. No skid marks. No hesitation. It wasn't a crash. It was a suicide attempt. But fate has a sense of irony. Marcus survived. His seatbelt, the same safety measure he preached about at school visits, saved his life. He woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed, facing first-degree murder charges. The same man who once ran into burning buildings, now accused of hiring someone else to beat his wife to death with a hammer. Marcus Monroe was no longer the man in uniform, no longer the hero firefighter, no longer the father people admired at school events. Now, he was an accused killer, confined to a hospital bed, charged with orchestrating the brutal murder of his estranged wife, Lila Monroe. His face, once seen on charity calendars, was now plastered across every evening news bulletin, not as a hero, but as a monster in disguise. While Marcus recovered under guard, Reese Granger sat in an interrogation room, handcuffed, hunched, haunted, but still talking. He confessed in full how Marcus had approached him, promised him money, coached him through every detail. He spoke of their many meetings, their plans, the test run break-in. He even admitted to the dry run where he left boxer shorts behind, the same ones that police had found weeks earlier. And when asked who told him to make it look like a robbery, he answered clearly, Marcus did. But would a jury believe him? Reese was a drug user, a homeless ex-con, prone to hallucinations and riddled with inconsistencies. Even Big Will, the man who'd turned him in, admitted that sometimes Reese didn't seem all there. Still, the DNA didn't lie. The hammer, the clothes, the calls, the Lowe's footage, all of it added up. The pieces formed a puzzle too exact to be coincidence. In preparation for trial, prosecutors made a deal. Reese would plead guilty to second-degree murder. He would avoid the death penalty in exchange for testifying against Marcus. It was a risky move. Reese's stutter, triggered by stress, made him a shaky witness. And Marcus's defense was prepared to paint him as a liar with nothing to lose. But when Reese took the stand, he delivered the final blow. The courtroom was silent. Marcus sat motionless. Ava, now living full-time with her grandmother, was not present. Neither was Clara, Lila's sister, who had once warned police she suspected Marcus all along. Reese wore a clean shirt. His hands trembled, but his words were sharp. He told me to leave the garage open, so he'd know the job was done. He gave me the key. He said he'd pay me more when it was finished. He detailed how Marcus had tried to plan Lila's death in the Palms Casino garage, how they abandoned that plan due to security, how they chose her home instead. And finally, he pointed at Marcus in court. That's the man. That's who told me to kill her. The prosecution didn't need to say much more. They had the timeline. They had the physical evidence. They had a recorded 87 calls between Marcus and Reese in a single month. But it wasn't just what they had. It was what they didn't. Marcus never took the stand. The only person to defend him was his sister, and even she couldn't explain the Lowe's receipt, the hammer, or the phone records. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, and when they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty of first-degree murder, of conspiracy, of arranging the murder of his wife. At sentencing in December 2015, the judge didn't hold back. He called the crime cold-blooded, calculated, one of the most disturbing betrayals of trust this court has ever seen. Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but it wasn't over. In 2017, Marcus filed an appeal, handwritten, over 100 pages long. He claimed his trial attorney had been incompetent. He claimed the drugs he took for a work injury had altered his mind. He claimed that God had told him to kill Lila, to protect Ava from her mother's darkness. The appeal was denied. The court's response was direct. Given the patience, subterfuge, and perseverance involved in this plot, there is no reasonable probability the outcome would have changed. So that was it. Marcus Monroe, once a decorated firefighter, once a loving father, now lives out his days behind concrete walls and locked doors. He will never again walk free. As for Reese Granger, he remains in prison as well, serving his reduced sentence under the deal. And Ava Monroe, the child at the center of it all, she graduated high school in 2023. She's lived with her grandmother since the day her mother died, and the day her father, the man who was supposed to protect her, used her presence to stage a murder scene. We don't know what she remembers. We don't know what she believes. But we know this. She lost both her parents that day, one to death, the other to deceit. Some stories end with closure, some with redemption. But this one ends with a daughter caught in the wreckage of two lives torn apart by betrayal and blood. The Monroe family had once stood for everything hopeful. A bright, smiling couple in wedding photos. A little girl raised in a cozy, suburban home. A firefighter father. A devoted mother. But beneath that polished surface was a truth so dark, so orchestrated, it shocked even seasoned investigators. And when the dust settled, Ava Monroe, just 8 years old at the time, was left with no mother and no father. After the trial, Marcus didn't speak publicly. He sat in silence during sentencing. No apology, no explanation, no tears. Some said it was because he was still in denial. Others said he didn't care. But the truth might be even colder. He still believed he could win. In his 2017 handwritten appeal, Marcus painted a version of reality that defied reason. He claimed he was mentally impaired, that pain medications from an old firefighting injury had distorted his judgment, that he wasn't truly himself, that God had spoken to him, told him that Lila was dangerous, that her death would save their daughter. But the court saw through it. The same man who coordinated calls, mapped locations, provided a key, purchased a hammer, and staged a break-in, wasn't a confused husband in distress. He was a man who plotted murder with calm, chilling precision. The judge's ruling on the appeal was clear. The patience, the deception, the methodical planning, none of this supports mental impairment. These were not the actions of a man lost in confusion. These were the actions of a man determined to eliminate his wife and get away with it. Appeal denied. And so, Marcus Monroe remains behind bars, his life a long corridor of locked doors and missed birthdays. Reese Granger, his hired hand, will likely serve the majority of his sentence before being released in old age. Some say he was just a pawn. Others say he could have walked away. But the only true victim here is Lila, a mother, a daughter, a woman who worked hard, loved deeply, and died terribly. Her final moments, scared, betrayed, alone, are burned into the memory of a community that once admired the man who arranged her death. As for Ava, she grew up away from the spotlight, away from courtrooms and cameras, raised by her maternal grandmother, the one constant she had left. And despite everything, Ava made it. She graduated. She smiled at her yearbook photo. And she continues on, carrying the weight of two legacies, one of love and one of horror. This story isn't just about murder. It's about the mask of perfection, the lies people wear, the lengths someone will go to keep their image intact. Marcus Monroe didn't kill out of rage. He killed out of calculation. He didn't snap. He planned. For weeks. In secret, while tucking his daughter into bed. He knew what he was doing, and he did it anyway. And all of it, every step, every twist, every heartbreak, was nearly buried until one tiny mistake. A pair of boxer shorts, left behind, forgotten. That single oversight turned a perfect plan into a trail of breadcrumbs. And that trail led straight back to Marcus. So if there's a lesson to be learned, maybe it's this. No mask stays on forever. No lie is truly airtight. And no matter how carefully you plan, the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. In memory of Lila Monroe, she deserved so much more.